Hi everyone, and welcome to another video about video games with me, Rob, and today we're talking about Children of Morta. Now, this is a fantasy action RPG with a very 8-bit, 16-bit art style. It's developed by Deadmage, who previously made games like Shadowblade and Epic of Kings and Garshasp, however you pronounce that. And it's published by 11-Bit Studios, who brought us such games as Moonlighter, This War of Mine, Frostpunk, and various others. And, Moonlighter, I'm going to bring that up because there are certain parallels between Children of Morta and Moonlighter when you play the game. Although Moonlighter is kind of Children of Morta light, I suppose. Children of Morta is much heavier going, has much more of an in-depth story, and has far more connected characters and tasks and goals and little side missions and things like that. It's a much more complex world than the world of Moonlighter, and that's an interesting place to start this from. Children of Morta is set in a world where they have the mountain of Morta, and at the top of the mountain there is something that's been sealed away, the corruption as they call it. At the very beginning of the game you see the corruption is let loose, and the corruption is called that for a good portion of the game. You don't really understand it that much at the beginning of the game. You just know that it's twisting animals and creatures and people, and dark beings are committing these foul, obnoxious, horrible rites using the bodies and the parts of dead creatures, and it's basically an antithesis of everything that's good and right and natural, and that's why it's called the corruption. And this is the story of the Bergson family. The Bergsons are hereditary protectors of the world. It turns out they are the guardians of the Mountain of Morta, which is where the title Children of Morta comes from. They are the guardians, and they share certain abilities, certain traits, and these come out as you play the game. Now, the game has an interesting narration style when it comes to the storytelling. There are subtitles, but it has an interesting narration style, which I kind of like because it adds to the epic nature of the overall story. You basically discover the history of the Bergson family as you're playing the game. There are procedurally generated dungeons that you go through. There are certain things that you can do. Uncle Ben, for example, he is a smith and craftsman, and he can make pretty much anything. He can strengthen your weapons, your armor. He can help you improve your agility, your critical hit chance, various things like that. But this costs Morva, which is the currency of this world. On the other hand, Grandma Margaret, she is the sage type character, and she can unlock ancient wisdom and knowledge and allow you to gain more Morva when creatures die, and also have more luck, make certain abilities last longer, and all sorts of things like that. And those abilities come from things like symbols and runes and little add-ons that you find throughout the dungeons. The art style is very colourful, and it's interesting because it's one of those games where you don't expect it to be as colourful as it actually is. You don't expect it to be as vibrant as it actually is. You don't expect it to be as detailed as it actually is. And that's a testament to the skills of Deadmage, and I'll be honest, it makes me really, really look forward to their next game, Tale of Ronin, which is going to be out at some point. But we're not talking about that. We are talking about Children of Morta. This is an amazing game for an indie developer to make. Let me put that out there. If you're an RPG fan, then this is quite possibly... I mean, right now, for me, Children of Morta is on my top 5 games of the year. I haven't stopped playing it since I started with the full review version after playing through the beta. The reason for that is because I want to see what happens next, and I love the way it plays. I love the interconnected nature of the Bergson family, the fact that the Bergsons who go out to fight, they can influence each other's survivability as they're going through the different dungeons and the different areas. So the Bergson family, the father has certain abilities which can then influence the survivability of his daughters and his sons. And the same goes for his children. His children can awaken certain abilities, certain traits that affect the survivability of their siblings and their father. You can also add various characters that you find to your family as well, and certain objects that you find to your house. And the more you progress through the game steadily becomes more and more difficult. Every so often you'll see enemies that are in yellow. These are the strong enemies, and there are tactics you can use that will allow you to easily beat these enemies. Because if you try and fight some of them head on, then you're going to get squashed very, very quickly. And if you do get squashed, don't be scared, because this is one of those games where you can't really die. Before you die, you get transported back to your house, but if you die a certain number of times, then you basically fall victim to the corruption sickness, and that means you can't use that character for a certain amount of time, which I really like. I think that's great because it limits your options, and it means you have to play with characters who maybe you'd ignore in favor of other characters that you more traditionally play with. That's a little bit of an addition to the game that I think really adds to the game. Other things that add to the game are the actual range of weapons that the characters use. The father uses the sword and shield, and that's one particular fighting style, whereas his eldest daughter uses a bow and arrow, and that's a totally different combat style when you're in the dungeons, where the father is stand in front of the enemies and hit them with the sword. The daughter is always moving and always shooting at enemies, and that is a very different playstyle. Then you get to the youngest son, Kevin, and he has more of a ninja type playstyle. So he's got the short dagger type swords, and he basically runs around and hits them with really fast attacks, then dodges, then hits them from the back with more fast attacks and things like that. And then you've got the eldest son, Mark, who is unarmed combat all the way through. And then you have the youngest daughter, who basically wields fire. That's an amazing range of combat styles that you'll find in an indie game. Most indie games of this type just have you playing one character, and that's it. And that's the shocking thing about this game. There is so much of it. So much. I don't want to say it's too much, because it isn't. I really don't think it is. I think they've basically hit the right level. Dead Mage have done an amazing job with this game. Okay, it's going to have certain issues which really aren't worth mentioning, to be honest. They really aren't. There is so much to this game that is there that you will love, especially if you like your action RPGs, especially if you like your fantasy stories, especially if you like the whole aspect of one family standing against the darkness to save the world, which I love that idea. I think it's a great idea. I think that more games and more stories should basically stop having a single lone hero stand up and save the world and start having the old style way where you had companions who were there, who were just as strong and just as important. In this case, a family. It's not rocket science, and I think that's amazing. Dead Mage, you've done an amazing job. 11-bit, you've done an amazing job bringing this game to us. And it's available on PC right now, and it's going to be available on the PS4, Xbox One, and the Switch at some point in the middle of October. So, console owners, don't worry. You can look forward to this game. Children of Morta is one of those games that you really owe it to yourself to play. There is very little that you won't love about this game if you are into this genre of gaming. And even if you aren't, give it a try. You might find that you are interested in a way that you didn't actually think was possible. Now, I will say one thing about the controls before we leave this. The controls initially are your standard keyboard mouse controls that you'll see in certain other games. So WASD to move around, and basically you angle your attacks with the mouse, stuff like that. Now, that's fine, but there is another way you can play it though, and that is with a controller. It might not work as well as keyboard and mouse with a controller. I found that it was fine, but then again, I was using a Steam controller when I played it. It takes a bit of getting used to with the Steam controller, but eventually, once you get used to it, you really won't go back to the mouse and keyboard method unless you're using certain characters, in which case mouse and keyboard method for the win, because it just allows you to do certain attacks that you just wouldn't be able to do with the actual controller. Let me know what you all thought about Children of Morta in the comments below. Always looking forward to hearing what people think about the games that we cover on this channel. If you want to see more videos like this, then hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and I'll see you all next time.
Now, the fire child was ready.